Hello, I'm Kim McDevitt, the Executive Director of Mental Health America of Lancaster County. Welcome to Mental Health Now. Today's topic is on suicide prevention. With us today, we have Govan III. He's the Chair, the Executive Director, and Founder of Suicide Prevention Alliance. We have Jayne Miller, who is our Mental Health Education Coordinator for WellSpan. And we have Rhim of TD Rhim Consulting, who is also a surviving parent. We thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
This is a very difficult subject matter to discuss, but as you said, Govan, we need to start the conversation. I think you have that on your website, and you even mentioned we need to keep talking about this. According to the CDC, suicide rate increased 30% between years 2000 and 2018 and declined in 2019 and 2020. During the pandemic, we saw a decrease in suicides, and some attributed that decrease to connectedness, the fact that we were connected to each other, we were all in home together, or most of us were, and the emphasis placed on mental health, the importance of that, and the reduction in stigma that happened as a result of the pandemic. How can we maintain that connectedness and the importance of self-care and seeking help when we return to the way things were pre-pandemic?
Well, I think one of the things that with the pandemic brought a lot about knowledge about technology on how we can stay connected. If only one invested in Zoom, that would have been an amazing thing for me personally. However, what has happened since the technology with Zoom and Teams, that it has brought people connected. And even when now, as people are starting to get back to normal, whatever normal is, that I believe that people are going to go obviously back to school, back to college. Parents are going to maybe also, who were living with their adult children, we're going to go back to wherever they were because of, healthy reasons now. And kids are now, teenagers are now going back to schools. So less eyes on the problem. However, I believe that, with technology we can still stay communicated, because now we've had a 2-year learning period how we can stay connected. Hopefully that keeps up. I think we still don't know, you've read some of the reasons why the suicides have decreased in the past 2 years, but I still think we have a waiting period to find out, what really happened during the pandemic, and were those some of the reasons why. So we still have a couple of years to go to see what worked and what didn't work. But I think we have to be prepared at all times to make sure that we're right on the cusp of staying connected with everybody involved.
Yeah. Jayne?
I agree. I think the pandemic, what it did is it helped us. It opened the door to talk about mental health. More so than we ever experienced before. So, hopefully it's a reflection that people are getting the help. They're willing to say, "Oh my goodness, this is what this symptom is."
Yeah. Right.
Instead of trying to postpone and ignore it. I think the pandemic did kind of.
And we're inviting people to have those conversations.
Exactly.
So it's all over the media. We're talking about it in schools. We're talking about it in our workplace.
Absolutely.
What would you say, again, the biggest risk factors of suicide? Especially now post-pandemic, right? So, it's funny. I think I'm more stressed out now than I was during the pandemic, because I feel like we've now returned and we're trying to catch up on the slowdown. The slowdown was not bad for a lot of us, right? So it allowed us some personal time. Some of us, not all, actually, worked from home. And so we were connected to our children, our significant others. So when we look at that risk factors, what would you say they are now?
I think Govan weigh into this, but I think that they're the same risk factors, really, that
what would they
were there
be?
before. That thwarted belongingness. I can't belong. I want to belong, but I don't feel like I belong. And it's my perception of that, you know? I mean, when I worked crisis, I had people in crisis that had a lot of people that cared about them, but they couldn't see it, they couldn't feel it. So the thwarted belongingness, the perceived burdensomeness, you know, I weigh on the people I care about. They'd be better off without me, those kind of thoughts that might swirl. And the thing that I know I get most concerned about is if there's kind of that acquired capability of moving in the direction of self-lethality.
I think one of the biggest ones that I see all the time across every age bracket is relationship issues. And it doesn't have to be an intimate partner, it can be a parent, it could be a child, it could be a sibling, it could be a friend. When those relationships falter and break up, you know, but here's the thing that we don't look at. Everybody tries to blame suicide on one issue.
Right.
Suicide is always multi-causal. So there's many different issues that actually occur in someone's life that, you know, just fall apart, and that they feel that they don't have anybody to belong to. They feel that they have no one to turn to. That suicide is ultimately the most difficult conversation they can have somebody because they're afraid. So also one of the biggest risk factors if someone in their family has died by suicide, or they knew someone that died by suicide. It's also, you know, job issues. But people can have them in life and not be suicidal. It's usually because of the multiple factors intersecting with one another. And that, you know, that they have nowhere to do. They're afraid to ask forward or come forward and talk about suicide, which is, again, I think, as you said in the beginning, one of the things that we have to do, and I'm so thankful we're doing this today, is start the conversation, that it should be open and non-judgmental. And if we get to that point, more people will approach us. It should be like, hey, if I have a broken arm, I'm going to the doctor.
Right.
If I have problems, I'm going to go seek therapy. And if we approach it that way, I think we're going to have a lot more success and less suicides that occur.
Yeah, T, you had mentioned, we spoke on the phone about this conversation today, and you said that you wanted to talk about this, and you didn't want your daughter's death, Soraya, to be, you know, she died by suicide February 1st, and you wanted to bring awareness to our community and other communities. What would you like the public to know about Soraya and your experience? And
Soraya was 25 years old. She was much more than her bipolar disorder. And I want people to know that that's just a component of who they may be, whatever the mental health issue is. And in some cases, like we reached out to Soraya, we talked every day, family, so we had the close-knitness. I think that's probably why we knew early on that she had taken her life that very next day. But I think to Govan's point, there's a lot to be said around the relationship piece. It is key. It's important, and if nothing else, we really just need to recognize that the person who determines that they're going to die by suicide really is a culmination of more than just that. And so the relationship piece, I think, is critical.
Another thing that we can dumb it down, I think, really for the risk factors and in warning signs. Changes in loss in someone's life, loss of their relationship, loss of a job, changes in maybe moving to an unknown process. Retirement is huge, for some people. So multiple changes and multiple losses intersecting again with one another. If you want to, dumb it down, is those factors that we look for. But really where we have to start, not just start the conversation, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but ask the question. I think we need to be comfortable about talking about suicide, which I'm so thankful we are here today. And it's so brave and courageous of you to be talking about this and so fresh in the process. But you're doing exactly what we need to be doing and with suicide prevention, is talking about it, how that impacted you, and what can we do better to, create this conversation and be comfortable and do it. It is an uncomfortable conversation, but it's also enlightening to people who are in need.
Yeah, and you can't have the conversation after the fact. you will
Not
have
with
those
that
regrets.
person,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's
You
kinda
had
like
the
giving-
conversations with your daughter
Absolutely,
before.
with all three of our children, absolutely. Now, she probably was, of my three children, Soraya probably was the one with bipolarity that really struggled the most. And we stayed on top of it. We talked every day. I would take trips and get on a plane and get there at 9 o'clock at night after work, going to Virginia to say, listen, I'm coming. I'm on my way. And she just needed her mom close to her. I get into bed with her. We go to sleep. I get up the next day. I get on the plane and go back to work because that's what she needed. And so there's a level of commitment to not just parenting, but just building relationships. She was an adult. So that adult relationship is also important. And just letting her know, you are loved, you are cared for. I am a plane away, and if you need me, you call me. And everything else does stop. It'll be there when you get back.
When we spoke on the phone, you said you're just so positive. You're positive, and this experience, although tragic, you are moving positivity forward from this experience. Can you share a little bit about, can you share with us what you've learned from this experience and what you want others to learn from this experience?
Absolutely. So some of the things that I've learned were things about myself. The one thing that my son said to me as we were preparing for Soraya's burial is that he had never seen me cry. And I recognized that I had never allowed myself to be vulnerable to my children because they thought that mommy was the strong one and I had to keep it together. There were many years that I shed tears, but they hadn't seen it, and I didn't realize that until my son said that at Soraya's death. So that was a learning lesson for me, to be more vulnerable in front of my children. You always think you're doing the best by parenting until they tell you that you have some opportunities. So I was like, okay, I want to grow and I need to learn that. The other thing was I stay in touch with them consistently until the point that they're just like, you just called me. Okay, well, I'm going to call 2 more times.
Yeah.
If you don't pick up this telephone, I'm going to get on the plane. I'm going to come to you too.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of learnings around that, but just learning a little bit about myself, being more vulnerable with my children, and really focusing on relationship building. I try to stay cognizant. At the end of the day, people first. The work will be there. The stuff will be there. People first. You got to take care of the people.
But I also want to bring up, with that being said, we also have to take care of ourselves too.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's one of the dangers in doing, the work that we do, is that we get so caught up in everybody else's issues that sometimes we forget about ourselves. And what we saw during the pandemic is we saw a lot of healthcare workers have an increase in suicides because of the burnout factor of just giving of ourselves and not taking care of ourselves. So at the same time, so we need to also have that, I would say, healthy balance, but okay, I'll say semi-healthy balance to try and make sure that, for a half hour a day, I always preach, make sure you do something good for you in the healthcare business and the healthcare world. So, and I have to remind myself of that because I'm horrible at that too. So,
In all of our worlds.
Yep, absolutely. In our next segment, we'll be focusing on trainings that'll be helpful to each of you on how to have those conversations. Welcome back. We're talking about suicide prevention today. In our last segment, we discussed symptoms, we discussed risk factors. There's a lot to learn about suicide, and it's, I mentioned during our break that sometimes I'm uncomfortable talking about this. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I don't know how to ask the right questions. There is a training that we all are aware of, QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, and it really helps train individuals on the right questions to ask, how to ask them, and when to ask them. Can you share a little bit more about the training and the importance of the training?
well, myself and Jayne are both QPR trainers, so I'm going to give this over to Jayne and let her talk about QPR, and then I'll put in my 2
Govan.
cents.
Thank you. Well, much like CPR, we can learn some steps to help a person survive. Not a guarantee. I could do CPR, those breaths and compressions, and just perfect.
Point.
But that's not a guarantee, but does the chance of survival go up? Yes. And I'm going to take that opportunity to possibly help that person survive. So 3 steps that we can learn, some questions to ask, how to ask someone whether they're having thoughts of suicide. And I always say, you know, I want to make sure that that person feels validated, that they understand that having suicidal thoughts, you know, is more common than we might think.
Right.
And then I'm going to ask them, and I'm going to ask them directly, look, you know, you've been going through a really tough time. And when people go through things like that, a multiple of things like that, you know, it's not uncommon to have some suicidal thoughts. I'm wondering, are you having any of those thoughts? Are you having any thoughts of ending your life?
What's interesting, because one myth that I took away from this training was that if you ask those questions, it's suggestive. It puts that idea in their mind. And that's a myth, right?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Let's face it, did we all know about suicide prior to this conversation? Prior to that being aired? Yes, we did. And I think that hesitation causes us to not open up that conversation because we're afraid. But when in reality, that's the lifeline, that conversation.
Right, so it invites them to talk about how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And you talked about your daughter having bipolar. So she had a mental health diagnosis, and she was struggling for some time. But that's not the case for everyone that is suicidal.
Right.
Correct.
So I think learning about those symptoms, and we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's essential that we all know more about suicide, that we all get comfortable asking a person about suicide, which is great with QPR and trainings like ASSIST, mental health first aid, and other trainings that are out there, Smart Talk. But I think that if we learn just a little bit, QPR is only basically an hour and a half to 2 hours long.
Oh,
And that-
Govan, don't say that.
It's 3
I
But-
like 3 hours.
No. I like 3 hours too. I'll take 4. I'll take a whole day if people have time. And I think we need to talk about suicide just
Yes.
more than the basic 2-hour presentation. And I'm all for organizations that want to promote that. However, if we make the conversation more comfortable, if we learn about those myths and those warning signs and those risk factors,
Yes.
then really that we're going to have a better success rate as far as getting people help. I can tell you that in numerous QPR classes and ASSIST classes that someone will come up to me afterwards and will say, you know, I'm struggling right now, and that will get them help, which is great. And the success rate, if they want to get help, which is why they approach us, is high, and that we get them connected. That's what QPR, that's what we're training people to do, is get them connected and get them help.
What's funny, when I first started working at Mental Health America, people approached me in the grocery store, on the streets. People DM'd me. People were reaching out and sharing their stories with me, people who I had known for a long time. And I thought to myself, why did it take me being a leader in this organization for people to do that? So let's say you don't have access to that training. What else could you be doing? What else could
Well,
you be doing?
you do have access to that training.
Okay. Good point.
Yeah,
Bring it to
I
your
mean,
workplace, bring it to
yeah,
your school.
And WellSpan
Bring it
offers
to your
it free of
community.
charge
Yeah.
in our area of service. So we do have access, and it's just, I think it's just being more intentional.
Good point.
And
Yeah,
purposeful.
and purposeful.
About seeking out the training. They could go to Suicide Prevention Alliance and get the training as well.
Exactly.
And I think, again, it's opening the conversation and having these discussions. Go, you know, in Lancaster County, they have the Lancaster County Suicide Prevention Task Force. So there's another way to get involved. We can all help
Yes.
and get involved, but it's just, which is our theme today, starting that conversation and asking questions. So please contact, you know, we have our wonderful person Kim, or we have Jayne, we have T. Ask us, Govan, Martin, ask us what we can do for you, because that's the key. We can't do this by ourselves. There's way too many people out there having thoughts of suicide right now. and having mental health issues. What we can do is open up that conversation and refer to the right resource. That's our objective in all this, in this conversation right here.
Yeah, and Govan, I always loved what you said. Have this conversation when things are fine.
Yeah,
Don't
normalizing
wait
the
until,
conversation.
don't wait
right?
until, oh my goodness, we're at a crisis point, I'm
Right.
seeing all these signs, now I'm gonna have the conversation. And that's good,
Right.
but don't wait. Have this conversation with your kids.
So at MHA, and I'm sure you do this as well, we do education in schools, and it's not just QPR, right? So
Right.
how do we educate, and I've seen the shift in culture, so how do we educate young folks to be able to recognize those signs and symptoms, and maybe being more comfortable if they're diagnosed with bipolar at a younger age? So I think that early intervention is also preventative. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 The more we talk about it, obviously, the more that people reach out for help. And that I think
And
really
recognize the signs, right, early so they can get support earlier.
Oh,
people
yeah.
are afraid of repercussions of what happens if they approach somebody else, and that they're afraid of judgment. They're afraid of, friends finding out. They're afraid of their colleagues finding out. They're afraid of their family finding out. So, but if they approach the right person or people or organizations, we can actually reach them and have that conversation where we're not judgmental, and we can refer to the right
Yeah.
resource.
Well, the
Changing-
brain's in Oregon.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
we
And
kind
we-
of think like it's this
And we
separate thing.
underestimate,
Oh, my
the,
goodness.
the,
Just like other
yeah,
organs.
right.
Yeah.
So Govan, Jayne, and T, I think changing the culture. So starting at younger ages. I see my daughter, who's teaching her two children how are you feeling? Blow when you're angry. Like all those little techniques we're teaching, and really focusing on their mental health. And so I think just, again, that's how we can start normalizing it. Tobacco cessation. I mean, we saw growing up, my father smoked, my uncle smoked, everyone smoked. And today, the use of tobacco has decreased, right? So, and so I think just continuing to talk about this, normalizing the conversation, changing the culture, talking about it earlier, I think that's the change that we need to happen. And feeling comfortable.
Right, but I mean, it's more than just starting the conversation. We need to talk to, we need education, we need training.
Yes.
We also need to talk with people with lived experience.
Yes.
Those who've been impacted by suicide. T, like you, I'm a loss survivor as well. I lost my brother 42 years ago, and that still impacts me today, which is why I still continue to do this. And we need to do other things. We need better data collection, because we're not collecting, we're collecting minimal data in a wide schematic of why people die. We're not getting enough information. So we
And
need
you
to have
also-
those conversations.
You also shared that even though there are 50,000 deaths by suicide,
with
that there
around
are
the current statistics.
many more, because not everything is identified as a suicide.
So the
right?
latest
with-
statistics are 45,979 people, but however, we know that about 5 to 20% are unreported, because we're looking at overdoses that there is no note left, or car accidents there is no note, or indicators of suicide, so they're basing it on the cause of death. But if we're looking at actually, I said that for this current data that's concerned 45,979, I actually added the last 10 years. Which is almost 500,000. It's about 440,000 people that died by suicide. But if we add even 12%, split the difference between 5 to 20% underestimated suicide, unreported suicides, that actually it leads to almost 500,000, over 500,000 suicides that have occurred. And that gets lost in the conversation. And that's, unfortunately, we shouldn't necessarily base numbers on people.
Right.
And each number or each person that have died by suicide is huge. And again, numbers are indicators, but that doesn't heal when one person is lost to suicide.
So to wrap this up, What is one suggestion or recommendation you would make to the audience on how they can get involved in suicide prevention? We can start with you, T.
For me, I was catapulted into this because of Soraya's taking her life, and it forces you to really stand in the gap for people who have a need and they're not speaking on it. Now, Soraya spoke on it. She was very audible about it. Now, I don't know that all of her friends knew, but her close circle knew that she was bipolar. I think that getting back to the relationship piece, it is just key. It is just key. Like, my kids don't always want me in their space. I don't care. I'm going to be in their space, right? I want to know if you're okay. When they were young, I would make sure I would touch them and say, how you doing today? You know, and sometimes they couldn't audibly say, but sometimes they would cry, and I said, are you sad? You know, we talk about it. And so they became comfortable with the verbiage. So as she got older and as my children got older, they would verbalize, you know, I'm sad, Mommy. Well, let's talk about, why are you sad? Well, I can't have the cookie, or I can't, you know, but then as you grow up, those cookies become bigger issues.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So the relationship piece is just key. We gotta talk about it.
Right, stay connected to.
Absolutely.
Jayne?
Hey, I would say if you have time to be a part of a coalition, part of a task force that is, you know, trying to bring these numbers down, even if it's, you know, a couple hours a month, you know, go for it.
Yeah.
And also have this conversation with the people that you love. Don't wait till a crisis time,
Right.
you know. So
right.
yeah, just have the conversations.
Thank you.
I think what I would, you know, recommend is that, you know, for those seeking help, to reach out for help, and it can't, you know, I can't necessarily say, you know, we have to do one thing, but there is help and there is hope out there by calling 988. And if you're having thoughts of suicide, but also if you're, you know, also the one person that lost somebody to suicide, there are suicide support groups. There are people that will help you, but reach out for help. And really what it encompasses is just talk to people like you that, you know, from Mental Health America, from, you know, Suicide Prevention Alliance, by seeking out a QPR training. There's so many resources that are out there. And if you don't find, you know, the right resource, go somewhere else. I think that's what a lot of people get stuck on. They've had a bad experience in seeking out a resource, and then, okay, I'm not going anywhere else. No, there are people that can help. There are people that care like we do right here. We don't want to see anybody die by suicide. We just want to make sure that, you know, they get the help that is out there. There is hope out there. And, you know, a phrase I often use is people don't want to die by suicide. They just want to end their pain. So there's a lot that we can do.
So we don't want people to struggle in silence. So we invite you to get involved in the Suicide Prevention Coalition work that we're all doing, and reach out to MHA of Lancaster County. Govan, would you like to leave us with some parting words?
Okay. Common phrase I always use is that no one can do everything, but everybody can do something. And if everybody does something, then together we can change the world. So join us in helping save the world from suicide.
Thank you for joining us.